You receive a call. Everything is according to the regulations. Coordinates, alarm mark, manual activation. You turn on the engine and move out. But an hour later, they find you. A car with the engine running, the radio on, and you. No. Now the question, how can a signal come from a tower that was dismantled 6 years ago? How does a thing belonging to an employee who went missing 8 years ago appear in a car? In the same sector? And why did the man who knew this go anyway? What would you do if you found yourself there in complete darkness? And you will hear your own voice on the air, just not transmitted by you. If you open the Big Cypress Southern Sector alarm log for September 2004, there's a strange mark on page 15. It's a call to a point that hasn't been patrolled for 6 years. The marker is manual alarm, and the time is about 1:30 in the morning. The rules say you don't send a Lone Ranger out on a call like this, but there was only one in the sector at the time, Scott Laney. The replacement was running late. The base wasn't fully staffed, and judging by the logs, he just got up, grabbed his keys, and drove off. What's strange is that the signal really did exist. It was recorded on the central control panel. The problem is that the alarm post from which it came was officially dismantled back in 1998. The power line was cut off, and the emergency communications tower itself partially burned down during an arson attack in 1999. Then they decided not to restore it. Too deep, too expensive. Scott didn't say any of that night. He just went on air and said, "I received a signal from the southwestern cordon. I'll check it personally. I'm moving out." Silence in response. No confirmation, no cancellation. And 15 minutes later, he was already on his way. The last signal from his radio. Coming in on the old line. The connection may be lost. I'll stick to the main channel. From these words, one might think that he was going to a familiar place. In fact, the section he was heading to was no longer listed as active on any of the 2004 route maps. This is important because at the 4th kilometer of the old road, he makes an incomprehensible maneuver. He goes left, as if avoiding a direct approach to the alarm point. On the map, you can see. He makes a loop, turns back, and returns to the original line. And only then he goes straight to the signal coordinates. This is where it all ends. At 4:30 in the morning, Scott's official Jeep is found open. The engine is running. The radio is on inside, but on a dead frequency, just noise. The trunk is open. The first aid kit is taken out. The fire extinguisher is on the ground. And that's it. No Scott, no sign of a struggle, no tracks. Even on soft ground. Nothing. I've been there. Believe me, it's quiet, deaf, as if the sound doesn't reach back. If you stop, turn off the engine, you'll start hearing your own heart. No roads, no posts. Just the remains of the wooden paneling of the old observation post and the concrete foundation, torn from the ground, skewed. When they turned on the recording from his chest radio, everything seemed to start normally. Signal detected, visually empty. I'll inspect the perimeter. Then silence. Then a strange grinding sound, as if someone was running metal over wood. And then comes an unexpected phrase. "There's no one there. I hear some footsteps. I can't figure out how far away. I'm checking again." And then a break. That's it. He never went on air again. At first, they thought the radio had simply died, but the battery was fine. The connection could have been lost due to the terrain. Yes, that was possible. But then, why say he heard footsteps? He was alone, after all. 2 days later, a ground team left for the area. They searched the entire perimeter. Nothing. Even the dogs didn't take anything. Only one of them, according to the dog handler, froze, rooted to the spot, for a second at the old fence line, which no longer existed. Just low grass and broken pillars. That's all. Later, when they started looking at the logs of old objects, another thing emerged. The signal that Scott used to leave could not have been activated because the physical button had been removed 3 years ago. This was confirmed by 3 maintenance workers, one of whom personally removed it and handed it over to the warehouse. And here, everything went downhill. At first, they tried to explain it as a false alarm, technical failure. But then, how could they explain his route, his phrase on the air? And who, in the end, turned on the radio to a dead frequency? There are now more questions than answers, and Scott Laney was never found. Scott Laney was 36, a former military signalman. He had served in Bosnia, then a short stint at National Guard headquarters. After being laid off, he retrained through a government program and joined the Federal Park Service. He was assigned to Big Cypress. Although he had asked to be closer to home, he was originally from Tallahassee. At the time of the events in 2004, he already had almost 7 years of work under his belt. No complaints. On the contrary, his service cards noted strict, emotionless, does not panic, always on the radio, reliable on the route. And, as other Rangers said then, if Scott goes into the zone, consider the zone under control. He was not one to chat. At the base, he could go the whole day without saying a word. Always alone. He did not ask to go on joint shifts. He chose distant patrols, especially at night. He did not smoke, did not drink, did not argue. At the same time, what is strange is that he had an almost phenomenal memory for areas. He could name all the old communication points by numbers, even those that were removed back in 1992. And this is not a joke. One of his partners recalled, "I tell him, this area is closed. It's no longer on the map." And he answers, "Closed doesn't mean forgotten. You can still get a signal there if you know where to stand." After his disappearance, all call logs for the last 2 years were checked. He really never asked for help, even when he was working in flooded areas or during a thunderstorm. Only one report from February 2003 contains a strange note. Upon returning from patrol, he asked to check whether a false call had been received on line #14. He noted that he had received an incorrect alarm beacon, but the signal quickly disappeared. At the time, it was considered interference, Point number 14 was one of the old ones, decommissioned. It had received false alarms before, residual signals, interference from thunderstorms or old radars. But if you remember, then and that night, he did not wait for confirmation from the base. He just drove. His friend and former partner in the service, Mike Donner, recalled in an interview, he was the type to always double-check everything. If he had a suspicion, he didn't sit there. He went and looked for himself. But he wasn't the type to go into the wilds without a reason. So if he went there, he knew something. At the time of his disappearance, Scott had no family. He was divorced and had no children. His mother died in 1998. He had lived in the station's utility room for the last 2 years. According to the technician, he often went out into the zone at night without being called, to check the atmosphere, as he said. Sometimes he went into old communication areas and brought back pieces of wires and old signs. Once, he even brought back an old tape from a voice recorder that contained scraps of service conversations dated 1996. He listened to it and then gave it back, saying, "Nothing interesting, just noise and someone in the wrong place." This last one is a clue, because the archive he was accessing really did have some records lost. One version, old test channels, sometimes intersect with emergency ones. One way or another, Laney knew it, and he kept going back there. Nothing was found in the room after he disappeared. No notes, no diary, no clues as to where he might have gone. The only thing that raised questions was a map of the old route taped to the inside of the locker door. The route went from Sector 13 through Phoenix Creek and ended at a point labeled V1R, a code that did not exist on the official network. When this route was shown to another park veteran, he said, "This is an old bypass line along a drainage canal, but everything there is cut off. There are not even fords. If someone went there, he will not return." So the question remains, why did he go there? And why didn't he wait for his call to be confirmed? Or he knew that they wouldn't confirm it. When the rapid response team arrived at the spot where Scott Laney's GPS route ended at 4:30 a.m., the first thing that surprised everyone was the car. A service Jeep, a standard model, completely intact. Engine running, headlights off, driver's door ajar, trunk wide open. Inside, a first aid kit, a fire extinguisher, a radio, neatly folded, pulled out of its mount, but not broken, and on the front seat, a thermos of coffee. Warm. One of the first on-site, technician Dave Lowry, would later say, "It felt like he was out for 2 minutes. He didn't even turn off the show." What doesn't add up is that the car was in neutral, but with the handbrake on. Logically, if he was leaving urgently, he would have forgotten at least one thing. But here, everything seems to be according to the instructions, only without the man himself. There are no tracks nearby, no shoes, no drags, no broken branches, although the ground there is soft, slightly damp. Even if a coyote had passed by, there would have been a print. Nothing. And here's another thing. The radio inside the car was on, but it was on a frequency that hadn't been used for about 10 years. It was an old internal testing channel, abandoned after the transition to digital frequencies. You can turn it on manually if you know where to look, but you can't just pick it up. It's not the right range. From the speakers, there is a steady crackling, as if background interference. But one of the technicians, having turned on the recording, rewound it and caught a moment where, against the background of the noise, this recording was later checked several times. At first, they decided that it was background noise, perhaps an intercepted signal from another sector. But the signal was too clear, and the equipment there does not catch such distant frequencies. The map loaded into the car's navigator shows the route. Scott reached the conventional entry point, the beginning of an old drainage road, then drove about 300 yards and stopped. No U-turn, no attempt to drive away, as if he had arrived strictly at the coordinates. This point had not been listed in patrol routes as active since the late 90s. It was called the Tail of the Snake because of the bend in the river and the old sewer pipe that came out into the swamp. The last time they were on duty there was in 1997, when they were looking for a missing tourist. Then they only found a backpack. When they started combing the area, one of the participants in the operation, Sergeant Brenner, found something strange. In a hollow tree 20 feet from the car, there was an old worn clearance card. They wiped it off. You can see the name. S. Laney, but the number on it was not the one he had had since 2004. It was the one he had before 2001. An old clearance, outdated, canceled, officially destroyed. Even the coding for it was different. How did this card end up in the hollow? The actual communication tower, to which the signal allegedly came, was located 600 feet from the car. It was impossible to approach it directly. Thickets, a swampy area, rotting boards. But it was clear someone had recently tried to get there. The branches were broken. The dirt on the tree trunks was fresh, as if someone had clung to them in a jacket. But there were no tracks, no fabric, no blood. Clean. Then they brought in a helicopter. Nothing from the air. Only one area seemed strange. In one of the meadows adjacent to the swamp, the grass was lying to one side, as if someone had pressed it down with their entire body weight. But there were no prints. In the center was a round dent, as if from a heavy object. There had been no animals or equipment in that area for the last 2 days. The question remains, if Scott didn't go there, then who opened the trunk, turned off the headlights, turned on the radio? And if he did go there, why didn't anyone see him, hear him, or find a single trace of him? Now imagine you are walking at night along an old road where officially there is nothing, only sounds, as if someone is behind you, as if someone is whispering in a dead frequency. And ahead, light, which should not be there. If you break down Scott Laney's route minute by minute, using data from his car's GPS logger and the secondary beacon on his radio, you'll see that from the time he left the base to the stop, it took just over an hour. But one section, between the second and third checkpoints on the old road, stands out from the general pattern. It's a stretch of about 800 yards, recovered in 37 minutes, usually 10 to 15 minutes maximum, but here, almost 40. He was not standing, he was moving, but not forward. First, a normal straight line, then a sharp turn, going to the right, in an arc. Scott makes a loop, as if going around something, and not just turning, but as if looking for an alternative. The GPS shows he goes off the route by almost 400 feet, then comes back, then goes off again, then a pause. The car logs show stop, handbrake, engine on. 11 minutes, in place, without moving, without getting out of the car. There was no camera in the car, but the microphone worked. And one of the background decoding specialists later said, "You can clearly hear him repeating something, not into the radio, but to himself, as if he's checking or counting." The exact words were not restored. The noise interfered. But the structure of the speech, according to the expert, resembles a repetition of coordinates or a fragment of the route. Moreover, with an error. He voices the same segment differently 3 times, as if he gets confused. Then it moves again. But instead of going straight to the signal point, it zigzags. First, it goes left, as if it wants to go around a swampy area, which is logical. But then it suddenly makes an arc again, this time towards an old power line that was removed long ago. And it goes there without stopping, without slowing down. There is another stop, only this time it is for 3 minutes. At this very moment, according to the technicians, a short test signal appears on the air, similar to the automatic ping command of an old radio. But he didn't have the old radio. According to the regulations, only digital, standard format. This ping was recorded by only one base station, an old backup one, active only in test mode, but on a frequency that was no longer in use. It should not have passed. It should not have been there. But he was. And that's when Scott changes his route. He turns around abruptly and returns to his previous trajectory, as if he's received an answer or an instruction. One of the operatives working on the investigation said in an off-the-record conversation, "You know what it sounds like. It's like someone was talking to him there, not on the radio, just in their own way. It's like he was on his way to a meeting, or already knew where they were waiting for him." Another detail, Scott's car, after the evacuation, was found to have a strange malfunction. On the rear left wheel, there was a nail that had pierced the tread, a slow leak. The pressure was dropping gradually, and in the last half hour of the journey it was already at the limit. But he never stopped or checked, although according to the instructions, he should have, especially in the night forest zone. Why didn't you stop? Or didn't you notice? Or he didn't want to lose contact with the person he was trying to catch up with. When they went through the navigator data, the technician wrote in the report, "At the moment of the deviation from the route, he passed by the coordinates where a temporary communication antenna used to be. The point is not marked on the current map, but is in the 1997 archive. And right at this point, a short signal. Ping, break, reversal. It doesn't look like panic. It doesn't look like an accident. It looks like a conscious movement with route adjustments, with anticipation, with analysis, and perhaps with some kind of answer. But who was he talking to then? Scott went there alone. Officially, there was no one within an 8-mile radius at the time. No tourists, no volunteers, no patrols, no one. But from his movements, it is clear that he was in sync with someone. Scott Laney's radio was set to the standard 3FS channel, the same one used for nighttime watch in the southern sectors of Big Cypress. All transmissions were automatically logged, both at the station and at a backup tower 40 miles north. In theory, everything he said should have been recorded. But here, the strangest thing begins. Officially, the base received only 2 messages from him. The first, I received a signal from the southwestern cordon. I will check it personally. I am moving out. And the second, recorded at 2:16 in the morning. I'm going in via the old line. The connection may be lost. I'll stick to the main channel. That's it. After that, silence. But when opening the data from his personal radio, using the backup internal memory, it was possible to restore additional fragments, not through the radio station, but directly from the device. There were 5 more voice messages that the base did not receive, not because he did not send them, but because they did not arrive. And at the same time they went to another range, as if someone had switched the channel without notifying the central system. Here is the timeline. 2:19 m at the point. Visually, it's empty, it's quiet around, but there's a strange echo. I hear as if someone is nearby. 2:23 a.m. There's movement. From the left flank, along the old fence. I'm checking. I'm leaving the engine running. 2:25 a.m. The signal is weak, but there is a response. Someone is answering. Old frequency, reception is unstable. Can't make out clearly. 2:29 a.m. This doesn't look like a test. This isn't a beacon. This doesn't look like anything in the protocols. I repeat, there is a response, but from another line. 2:32 a.m. I'm leaving via the backup line. I'll try from there. If I don't get out, it means you won't hear me. End of connection. This is where I get goosebumps. He himself understood that the connection can be one-sided, that he speaks into the void, that he will not come out, does not mean he will die. He says, you will not hear. And he was right. None of these messages reached the station. But, by a strange coincidence, at 3:37 in the morning, the old backup tower, mothballed in 2002, automatically registered the reception of an external signal. Not outgoing, but incoming. This is an important point. It wasn't a transmission from Scott's radio. It was a signal coming to him. Someone was trying to answer on an old frequency through a system that had been shut down for more than 2 years. The experts were unable to decipher the content. Too much distortion. But the report states that at the peak of the signal, the structure of human speech can be discerned. Who sent this response and from where is unknown. No nearby station worked on this range. A theory would later be put forward. Perhaps Scott had switched to the emergency analog channel used in the 90s, out of habit, or on someone's recommendation. But then why did his digital radio automatically record it as an off-protocol message? And most importantly, how did he know what frequency to search on? And now another fact. The last message in his radio's memory is not from his mouth. This is important. It was not him speaking. It was a short, muffled phrase, recorded at a minimal volume, as if someone had spoken it next to the radio. Oh, he's still here. Background noises indicate the recording was made in the same place where he was last localized by coordinates, in the car, on the radio, turned on, before it turned off. Who said this has not been established? Scott was never found. But someone was with his radio that night and knew he wasn't gone yet. When the investigation team began to reconstruct Scott Laney's GPS route, everything made sense, right up until the last stop. The coordinates matched. The distances were confirmed. The signals were in chronological order. Until one detail came to light at 6:12 a.m., nearly 2 hours after searchers found his car. A patrol team called the center. A glove had been found. A regular work glove with a Park Service logo. It had been draped over an old metal box near the fence line, a mile from the main point, well beyond the old V1 sector. Glove, right. Mark on the inside. S. Laney. No options. There's just one problem. He hasn't reached this area yet. The GPS log shows that his route stops 1,400 feet before that spot. There are no tracks there. No car has driven there. No pedestrian route either. But the glove is there, and it's in plain sight, as if someone put it there. Not torn off, not lost, but put it there. Clean, dry, no blood, no dirt, as if it had just come out of the package. Later, when they checked the GPS fixation time on the glove itself, yes, it had an RFID tag that was used to keep track of the uniform. They discovered that the timestamp was 11 minutes older than the mark of Scott's arrival at that very point. That is, it was already there when he was still on the road. And this is not the only discrepancy in time. At 2:36 a.m., the backup radio station detects an incoming signal on the testing channel. Technically, it's just an automatic pulse, like an echo probe. Only this pulse comes with an identifier that previously belonged to the Station 6 base, disbanded in 1997. And although such IDs have long been removed from the regulations, this one completely and entirely matches one of the decommissioned ones. But the strangest thing is that this signal is recorded a minute before Scott even arrived at the old tower. There is a discrepancy in the logs. One analyst later said something that was later deleted from the official report. It feels like someone was working on his route in advance. There's more to come. Aerial photographs taken by a helicopter at 7:10 a.m. show an object that has yet to be explained. It is a small white package lying a few feet from the car park. It is clearly visible in the image, but when the team approached the site 20 minutes later, there was nothing there. No paper, no rag, no debris, no traces of movement. The cameras did not record any movement. No one from the team approached. This all added to the confusion, especially when another oddity was revealed. The tracker's last activity time on its radio was 3:44. That is, more than an hour after it stopped broadcasting. The system considers the device to have been active, but since that moment, it has not transmitted a single data packet. It simply burns, as if alive, but silent. The engineers were unable to explain it. One of them said in the corridors, "It looks like someone gave the device a command to be silent, not turn it off, but freeze it." This whole story breaks the logic of a standard disappearance. There is no "he left and got lost" here. Here are things that ended up where he wasn't. Signals that arrived before a response was possible. Coordinates recorded by someone other than him. And radio communication, which someone seemed to be deliberately conducting in parallel, but not with the base. And the question arises, if someone was ahead of his route, does this mean that he was expected 3 days after Scott Laney's disappearance on September 18th? A second team is sent to the area of the old communication line. The task is to reach the old emergency path along the Western Channel, where the V1R relay tower stood in the 90s. Officially, it was dismantled in 2001, but according to archival topography maps, a narrow technical passage used for evacuations remained in this area, and it was there, according to GPS data, that Scott headed at the very end of his recorded activity. The site is difficult to access. The soil is soft, swampy after rains. Equipment does not go there, only on foot. It is about a mile from Laney's car to the old line. Along the way, there are only thickets, a few concrete remains of old supports, and that's it. At the 600 yards mark, the group notices something strange. On the trunks of several trees are white paint markings, similar in shape to the old signal markers used in the park's communication system before 1995. These were applied by hand, only in emergencies and only with permission, to mark temporary detours. None of the current employees knew about them. Only one veteran, Joe Mills, recognized the markings. His reaction, "This is our handwriting, but we didn't draw it." The tracks lead to a destroyed concrete slab, the remains of the foundation of an old tower. The slab is partially sunken into the ground, one edge sticking out, as if someone tried to lift it, and underneath it, in a crack between the remains of the reinforcement, they find a leather bracelet with an identification tag, with the initials SL and the year, 2001. The same one Laney had worn before he changed to the new uniform. It had disappeared with him when the old clothes were written off and replaced with the new ones. No one knew if he had kept it, but there it was, under the stove, and it looked fresh. No dirt, the metal is not oxidized, the leather is not cracked. It's as if it was laid yesterday. Right there, near the wreckage of the old relay box, they find an emergency locking cable. It is used to manually reset the power supply to the communications section. It should not have been connected. The network is de-energized. But the end of the cable was inserted into a socket, and on the inner wall of the case there was a handwritten note. Reset if you don't get a response. Not through the central, only from the ground. This inscription was made in pencil over dust, as if it had been written recently. The handwriting has not been identified. There are no fingerprints. Next came another moment that alarmed everyone. Right behind the concrete slab is a patch of slightly sunken ground. One of the employees steps on it. The soil goes away. Clearing begins. 2 hours later, they find an old hatch covered with a wooden slab and covered with pine needles. The hatch leads to a cable channel, an old communications network forgotten after the restructuring. And on the wall is a sticker. Working service point, last visit, 03/12/97. But next to it is a new plastic flashlight, clearly not from that era. Modern. Model, released in 2003. Works. Battery, fresh. Someone put it there recently. Now the question: if the point is abandoned, the entrance is hidden, the marking is temporary and outdated. Who left the flashlight then? And who the hell knew there was a hatch there at all? The group does not go down. The oxygen level is too low. But a camera lowered on a cable shows the channel goes underground for 40 feet. Further on, there is a fork. And along the wall are fresh shoe treads. One of the group members says, "It felt like he went there, not into the forest, not along the path, but right here, as if he knew he could hide here, but there were no markers on his route to this place. Even in the papers of the 90s, nothing about the underground communication channel. It is listed only in the technical department's drawings, in an archive that has not even been digitized. So Scott knew about a point that shouldn't be there, or maybe they were taking him there. After this discovery, the entire investigation went deeper, literally. When the tow truck delivered Scott Laney's car to the base's interior, the initial inspection revealed nothing unusual. The tools were in place, the first aid kit was intact, and the paperwork was in order. But on the 4th day after his disappearance, an internal affairs investigator decided to open the glove compartment, even though it was unlocked. Inside is a standard set, a map with route marks printed for July, gloves, 2 pencils, and a yellow notebook cover. Without the notebook itself, just the cover. Empty. By itself, it would mean nothing if it weren't for the initials imprinted on the inside. JP. No one on the staff had those initials, but the name soon surfaced. John A. Peterson, a ranger who disappeared in the same sector almost 8 years ago, in the fall of 1996. Then he also went to check the communication point on the Southern Line and did not return. His car was found with the ignition on. The connection was cut off after the words, "Everything is calm at the point. I'll go check the hand transmitter." Neither Peterson nor his equipment were ever found. The case was closed 3 years later, attributed to drowning in a swampy area, although the body was never found. Destiny is unresolved. And now, here is its cover. In Laney's car. No explanation. Judging by the condition, the cover was not stored in the open air. No moisture damage, no fungus. The leather is thick, barely worn along the edges, But there is another nuance. Inside, on the back, someone has thinly, barely noticeably scratched with a pencil. The point is not accepting go down. This matches Scott's route. He went to the point without receiving confirmation, and then headed to the line under which the same channel was later found. That is, perhaps he already knew that he had to go down, or he was told. Question: where did he get this cover? The selection squad members recalled that the night before the call, he spent a long time digging through the service archive. He was supposedly looking for old communication schemes. No one paid attention. But now it becomes clear he was putting together a route possibly based on materials that were not in the general system. Now, about the glove compartment itself. Upon detailed inspection of the panel under the cover, the technician discovered that it was not original. Inside, there is a layer of foil lining, which is used to suppress radio signals. This is not installed. This means that someone deliberately made a compartment with shielding. For what purpose? To store a device that does not give a signal? Or, on the contrary, one that receives but is not noticeable? What was there, no one knows. But judging by the tracks, there was clearly something lying there, an empty outline. But what really alarmed the team was the complete lack of traces around the car. After so much time, even on soft ground, even after the rain, there should have been something left, especially if he got out, opened the trunk, took out the fire extinguisher. But no, not even a fingerprint on the door, just his own print on the ignition handle. Everything else is sterile. The dog handlers made a second inspection. The dogs did not pick up the scent of the car in any direction. It was as if Laney had disappeared inside it, or had not come out at all. One of the searchers, already in an informal conversation, said, "It's all too neat," as if someone was putting the scene together, not throwing it away, but creating it on purpose. And when asked what exactly seemed strange to him, he replied, "Everything, especially the radio. It was on, but not for him. It was playing into the void, as if someone wanted us to hear it." The official report on the Scott Laney case closes on page 47 under the heading Radio Communications, with a short line: transmission received out of protocol, technical failure, not subject to investigation. But if you dig deeper, there lies perhaps the most disturbing fact in this whole story. At 4:03 a.m., an hour and a half after the last known signal from Scott's radio, and nearly 20 minutes after his Jeep was found running and empty, another base 35 miles to the east picks up a voice transmission on a long disused emergency frequency. At first, the technical department decides that this is an echo of the old channel. But when the transcript passes through a noise reduction filter, the recording clearly shows. Moving along the line, call back if you get it. I saw a light, not a headlight. Maybe someone... Noise. I repeat, I am not alone. Someone is on the route, but without uniform. I will turn to the old line if I do not hear an answer. This broadcast, according to recordings, lasted 37 seconds. Afterwards, silence. The problem is that none of the active stations in the radius received it. Only the old relay point R2, which since 2002 has been used exclusively for technical measurements. It should not have received voice communication. Its receiver has long been switched off, but the recording was preserved. The service flash drive, installed in test mode, was still writing logs. And at that very moment, it recorded Laney's transmission. And now the main thing. An analysis of the audio file showed that the signal could not have come from his service radio. The frequency, modulation, and transmitter type all point to a different type of device. 10 years older, analog, not digital. This was used in the 90s before the complete modernization of the communication system in 2001. That is, either he somehow found and used old equipment, or, and no one said this out loud, he wasn't the one hosting the show, and someone who knew his route, knew his voice, and knew where and when to transmit. The second blow came when one of the officers decided to listen to a portion of the recording in slow motion. He noticed Scott's intonations were a little smoother than usual. The pauses were unnatural. The repetitions of phrases were as if in the right places, but almost not human. It was as if someone was playing a recording rather than speaking live. This hypothesis did not make it into the official report, but the service sent out an internal memo which I was able to read. Check for possible access to Patrol Laney's voice command archive. Particular attention to requested audio files from 2003-2004. In other words, someone could have used fragments of his old voice messages, collect them, hand them over on his behalf, on a frequency that no one listens to, at a time when he might no longer have been in touch at all. For what? This is where the most alarming part begins. When the contents of that recording were later deciphered in full, it turned out, at the very end, almost at zero signal level, there comes a second voice, female, very quiet. As if standing next to a radio, the phrase is short, without emotions. He heard, but he didn't understand. This is no longer just a loss of connection, not just a lost route, not a technical glitch. This is goal-oriented management. Someone controlled the route. Someone was working through dead frequencies where no one listens. Someone used the voice of a person who might no longer be available at that moment. And someone was near his radio at the moment of the last transmission, afterwards. So that's the story. These were all the official pieces of evidence listed in the case. If you've ever experienced something similar, on a hike, on a trail, out in the woods, share it in the comments. Maybe not with you, but with someone you knew. Sometimes small details can open up something bigger. And if this story stuck with you, save the video, add it to a playlist, come back to it later. Sometimes the full picture only makes sense the second or third time. And if you feel like someone's hiding something here, say it. Cases like this often stay alive only because someone refuses to forget.